Welcome, welcome. I am Celeste Watkins-Hayes. I am the Joan and Sanford Weill Dean here at the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy at the University of Michigan. It is so great to welcome you to Weill Hall and to have all of you join us today. So we are especially pleased to partner on today's program with our colleagues and friends at the Center for the Education of Women Plus, otherwise known as CEW Plus, and with its executive director, Tiffany Mara. At the Ford School, we deeply value our ongoing collaboration with CEW Plus, our shared commitment to advancing research, supporting scholars, and translating ideas into meaningful impact in the world, making our partnership together especially meaningful. In just a moment, Tiffany will introduce today's lecture and conversation. But first, I want to extend a special welcome to one of our speakers, Cortney Sanders, a distinguished member of our Ford School community. Cortney is a 2017 Masters of Public Policy alumna, and she is chair of our alumni board. Cortney, it is truly a joy to welcome you back, especially in this capacity, and to hear from you today. We are so proud of the leadership you continue to demonstrate and the ways you embody what it means to be a Fordie, leading with clarity, purpose, and impact. Your alma mater is so very proud of you. So today, Cortney will share her work as the 2026 Twink Frey Visiting Social Activist. Her efforts to address structural inequality speak directly to the kinds of questions we care deeply about here at the Ford School. They also resonate with my own early scholarship on access to the social safety net, particularly for women, and the barriers that too often stand in the way. So you will hear more shortly about her work and the contributions she's been making during her time on campus. Let me also briefly share the flow of our program. Tiffany will begin by introducing today's Mullin Welch lecture. We will then hear from Cortney, followed by our featured guest, Anna Gifty Opoku-Agyeman, the author of The Double Tax: How Women of Color Are Overcharged and Underpaid. After their conversation, we're going to open things up for audience questions. So we're going to have a great conversation, and a really important conversation today. And then when we conclude, we hope you'll join us for a reception in our Becky Blank Great Hall right after this program. So I want to thank you again for joining us. And now please join me in welcoming Tiffany Mara, Executive Director of CEW Plus.
Thank you, Celeste, Daniel, and Lysandora, for your partnership in making today's event possible. Today's lecture is co-sponsored by the Ford School. Thank you very much, Celeste. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge how the land we are currently sitting on was acquired by U of M, a history that we're not proud of, but must recognize as a part of our legacy. U of M was established on the homelands of the Anishinaabe, the Three Fires people. It was in 1817 that the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations were obligated to cede their sacred lands through the treaty at the foot of the rapids, with the promise of access to an education once the university was established. I recognize that this acknowledgement cannot undo the harms or legacies of settler colonialism. However, it can make each of us reflect on the treatment of Indigenous people and hopefully encourage each of us to find ways to support and uplift Indigenous populations. Welcome, university leaders, family members of Elizabeth Charlotte Mullin Welch, who are seated in the second and third rows over on this side, after whom this lecture series was named as, I skipped a part here. After whom this lecture series was named, as well as staff, students, community members, friends, and distinguished guests. My name is Tiffany Mara, and as Celeste mentioned, I'm the proud executive director at CEW Plus. It's my honor to be with you here today for the Mullin Welch lecture with Anna Gifty Opoku-Agyeman, presented as a conversation with Cortney Sanders. Cortney will first present her Twink Frey Visiting Social Activist project. We're pleased to welcome Sam Scipio, who is seated, I've lost her now. Over there, Sam Scipio over here, a Detroit-based designer who translates complex ideas into clear narrative and imagery. Sam will be taking visual notes that will be shared at the end of the program, so don't leave early because it's going to be amazing. She showed me some of her work, and it's really quite cool. Before we get started, I'd like to share with you the inspiration for this lecture. Elizabeth Charlotte Mullin Welch grew up in El Paso in the 1920s. She was a bright, tough, energetic personality who thrived on challenging the expectations set forth for privileged women of the era. She studied journalism at the University of Michigan in the late Depression, pre-World War II era, during which she pursued wide-ranging interests in the art, literature, politics, and theater. She was the rare woman in the intellectual and artistic circle that included Arthur Miller, Mike Wallace, and Jerome Wisner. Upon her graduation in 1939, her parents gave her a confounding gift: tuition to a prestigious writing seminar and a secretarial course. Elizabeth wasn't interested. Instead, she entered the world of work, first at a Detroit radio station and then in New York at the Ladies' Home Journal. Later in her career, Elizabeth rose through the ranks of a major department store chain to become one of the few women comptrollers in the United States. Behind the scenes, she was also involved in theater in Philadelphia, where she lived with her husband, Charles Welch, a professor of history. Elizabeth passed away in 1974. I didn't have a chance to meet her because I wasn't born yet, but I would have loved to have. The Mullin Welch Lecture Series was established in 1989 by her two sisters, the late Marjorie Jackson and Frances Dazzler, in Elizabeth's memory, bringing to campus lecturers who exemplify her characteristics of creativity, strength of character, and expansive vision. Born to women in the 1920s meant that for most of Elizabeth's life, she didn't have access to credit cards or buying a home without a male relative willing to co-sign on her behalf. It wasn't until 1974, the same year that Elizabeth passed away, that the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed. The passage of the ECOA ensured that women could independently obtain credit cards and access mortgages regardless of their marital status. I hope that if you haven't already, you'll read Anna's book, The Double Tax, as it clearly puts into perspective the long journey for women in the U.S. and that there's still a long way to go, especially for Black women. I'm so pleased to introduce you to our first speaker, Cortney Sanders, who's currently serving as this year's Twink Frey Visiting Social Activist, a program which brings to CEW an activist who addresses gender equity issues. Cortney's TFVSA project examines labor market barriers and their impact on women's retirement, security, and longevity. Over the past several weeks, 5 total, Cortney has been envisioning policies and practices to support women of retirement age in exiting the workforce and retiring with dignity. The culmination of her TFA project will be an accessible digital toolkit that will first start as a presentation. Cortney is a policy expert and strategist who specializes in social insurance, fiscal policy, and racial economic equity. She currently serves as director of the National Jobs for All Network at the Institute for Race, Power, and Political Economy at the New School, where she leads strategy to advance a federal job guarantee and the right to meaningful work. Her work focuses on expanding access to dignified work, strengthening economic security, and shaping policy solutions that address structural inequality. She currently serves on the membership committee of the National Academy of Social Insurance, is a board member of PoliChick, Texas Engagement Fund, and is a visiting policy fellow with the Policy Academies. She was named on the 2026 Washington, D.C. Top 50 list by the Women We Admire organization. Cortney has also served as a political appointee for the Biden-Harris administration in the Office of the Commissioner of the United States Social Security Administration, as the senior manager at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and as a special advisor to poverty solutions here at the University of Michigan. She's also a former Aspen Institute, William Hurst Fellow, and Aspen Ideas Fellow. And last but not least, as Celeste already mentioned, Cortney is one of our amazing alumni from the School of Public Policy, who received her Master's of Public Policy from the Ford School in 2017. Please join me in welcoming Cortney to the stage.
I see it on here too? Can I see it on here as well or no? Okay. Yeah. Sure. Okay. So we're gonna get started. Thank you all for being here. It is so nostalgic, to say the least, to be here. And I see so many familiar faces. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you for the staff who put all of this together. Thank you for the turnout. Go Blue. People are like, people don't really kind of show up to the events anymore. And let's look at this. This is really just amazing. Special thanks to Twink, Frey, and the Mullin Welch family for this generous support that you all continue to give the university, especially CEW+, a place when I was a student I called home and also found guidance and support from. So thank you so much. And, it is really my deepest honor to be here today celebrating the 20th anniversary, actually, of the Twink Frey Fellowship. It actually started with the first academic fellow for 2005-2006, and her name was Connie Evans, and 20 years later, we're still doing this work, highlighting women and how we can do this more. I know that Tiffany said that I would present, and I'm gonna get to that, but I must thank a few people who were instrumental to the foundation of my research and to me and the fellowship. So first, the former acting commissioner, Dr. Kilolo Kijikazi, who's joining us live, virtual right now from North Carolina. Thank you so much for such a task to give me and trust with me to lead what we know is the first known to history ever interagency working group with the Social Security Administration, the Department of Labor, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, all together working to focus on labor market barriers and its impact on retirement outcomes, with the endorsement by the White House Gender Policy Council and OMB. To all my former colleagues from the federal government, I want to say thank you for joining me in that interagency working group, and to 3 special women who encouraged me to apply, because I wasn't even going to apply at first. And so I have to give them a huge thanks. Those women are Janelle Jones, who was and is the first Black chief economist of the Department of Labor, Angela Hanks, who currently serves as the chief of policy programs at the Century Foundation, and Kendra Bozark, a renowned scholar in narrative and communication work. Thank you. And then I have to thank, I promise you I'm gonna get to my research, Dr. Derek Hamilton and my colleagues at the Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy at the New School, and my board, my generous board, specifically the executive committee, Dr. Trudy Goldberg, Chuck Bell, and Stephen Monroe, Tom Zach, for giving me the time, the space to work here in Michigan and Ann Arbor over these past few weeks, doing something that is really deeply committed, that I'm really deeply committed to. And then finally, I like to thank my late mother, Hope Antoinette Sanders Adam. My sisters, who are all in Texas, so I have a deep connection to the Mullin Welch, knowing that she was born in Texas and I was too. And all the women in my life that loved me and supported me unconditionally. So today, as you can see, The Future She Deserves is the research title for my project. We know that over 700,000 Black women have been forced out of the labor market to date. We also know that women have seen less gains in good jobs in the jobs report since April of 2025. We also know that we continue to see underemployment rates rise. So this makes the case that we need better solutions. We need better programs to lift families out of poverty and to make sure that we have an inclusive economy that centers people and the environments in which we live. So for the past month, I have been distilling this research, lecturing on campus with over 200 students. I see the law school professor, Diana, thank you so much for letting me be in your classroom. And I see all of my favorite students that I got to lecture with. Thank you so much. And I also had the time to just focus on something that I didn't want to stop after leaving the federal government. Our research focused on how labor market barriers systemically play a role in one's retirement outcomes. And when controlling for factors like education and occupation, what we find is that racial and gender discrimination continues to persist, occupational segregation continues to persist, and prejudice for people with disabilities continues to persist, which all leads to having less retirement benefits. But more importantly, or should I say worse, people end up living in poverty as they age. And so my project is a mini digital toolkit, as Tiffany said, that's meant to articulate and really be a tool for public education and action to talk about these issues. It includes data on the labor market, healthcare, retirement benefits information, but also the policies and actions we might consider to help people just thrive better in their older years, specifically women. And what I've learned from this project, which is really rare, is that I was collaborating with all these incredible women, and we found out something in the research. Labor market economic scholars, they do their thing, right? And then we have the social insurance folks and the people who work on retirement benefit folks, they do their thing. And then we have people who focus just on women's issues. There is not really that many institutions or ecosystems that concentrates all three of those things together. And so this project, this work, it really is, I hope, a toolkit that starts conversations, but also it helps channel a movement of sustained policy and culture and action that we can start consistently having these conversations. And I'm so grateful that I'm, a part of the pioneership for us creating a community and ecosystem like this. So this is where it's all started. Right? This is the work that I did with Dr. Kilolo Kijikazi and the Social Security Administration. And I invite you to read our research. But then I had to dig a little bit deeper. And so what we found is that in 2023, 83%, right, of women on average was making compared to white men on the dollar. And we compare white men because they're the most advantaged in the labor market and the labor force, right? And so that is why we make that comparison. And we see also in 2004, it decreased to 81 cents to the dollar on average. And this gap just continues to persist. We also know that there's occupational segregation. I want to give a huge thank you to Afana Mabu, who at the time wrote a paper in 2024 about occupational segregation and also occupational crowding of Black women and lower wages. And it's really incredible to see that almost 2/3 of workers in the 20 lowest paid occupations in the United States are women, right? And we consistently see this over and over again. And it was brought to my attention when we were putting the toolkit together why this is important. When you look at, who is making what, and we see the wage inequality and the wage parities that happen with gender, with men and women, we also know that it's also not the same when you do it across race. So when you're at the intersection of gender and race, you continue to see, again, disparities. In the state of Michigan in 2023, it was ranked 29, where women were making 81% on the dollar compared to men, below the national average. And then in 2004, it ranked 45. Again, still trailing behind the national average, where women were making 79 cents on the dollar compared to white Michigan men here in the States. So, what this tells us, it tells us that we have a lot of work to do. And it also tells us, even when we laser into a city like Detroit, right, which is a major city in Michigan, where we see that they have 34.5%, according to census in 2004, of poverty, that's 3 times the national poverty rate. And for children poverty, it's 51%. Let that sink in. For every 2 children that are in an elementary in Detroit, one of them is probably living in a household experiencing poverty. And so think about that, because their parents are taking care of them, and if they're women who are not making enough, this is the reality, not just for the women, but also for the children, right? And so it's important for us to understand what ageism is, and it's also important to understand what sexism is. Both, according to the EEOC, are protected classes in the United States of America, meaning that you cannot discriminate because of someone's age or because of someone's sex. But what I really want to point to you all is that in the research, we also realized very quickly that after losing a job, older workers may have a hard time finding more employment due to ageism stereotypes. And then they're compounded when you are a woman. I met this woman, I'm not gonna say where at the store, but her name is Patty. Hi, Patty, if you're watching. And we were talking and she asked me about my research, and she goes on to say, yeah, they fired me because I was too old, and then they hired a younger woman, and they made it a point to say she was younger and more beautiful. And this was a woman who's working at a low-wage job here in Ann Arbor. And so this is our reality, and this is what we see over and over and over again. But there's more. So when we also look at unemployment and underemployment, right now, economists will say, oh, the economy is stable. Raise your hand if you've heard that on the news these days, right? The economy is stable. Well, actually, when we take in the full count, which is what I do at the National Jobs for All Network, and we look at the underemployment rate, which includes people who are in part-time work but want full-time work, people who just are no longer seeking, what we see is that, again, women are still represented in these numbers, and they are even more so when you start to account for women of color. Sandwich generation. How many of you all heard this term before? Can I get a show of hands? Yeah. It's this idea in which you are literally raising your children and taking care of your aged parents. And this is consistently happening over and over and over again, especially in women's lives, where it's kind of like, oh yeah, my sister, she'll take care of my so-and-so, or my wife, she's out of town today because she's taking care of her parents. And it's almost a casual conversation. But the reality is that when this happens over and over and over again, we see weathering, which is this another idea that health and aging have more to do with societal circumstances than our own personal choices. In other words, culturally, this is just what women do. We take care of our kids, we take care of our parents, and then what we start to see is we're getting a little sicker, more than usual. Our healthcare costs are rising because we're having to take care of ourselves and other people. And we are also sometimes, while taking care of someone, nearly on our own deathbed. This is the reality that so many women face. And we see that in certain occupations, the retirement coverages are still desperate. And we also see that occupations with very low retirement coverage are people like bartenders, drywall installers, hairdressers, and hostess, people at restaurants. They don't even have access to retirement plans. So again, you're in the sandwich generation, your health is declining, and you're like, you know what, I'll just take a break when I retire. And if you're in these occupations, the break seems less and less attainable. So, when I was in Social Security Administration, we loved this graphic which talks about Social Security was designed by FDR and Francis Perkins as a three-legged stool, that we were supposed to have Social Security, and then we were supposed to have your own personal retirement savings, and then pensions. By the way, do we even remember pensions? Because I'm like, where they at? I need them. So what we find is that not only are employers continually to decrease the access to retirement plans, to pensions, we also see that because women are working low-wage jobs. Because of occupational segregation, they don't even have enough to retire. Because they're a sandwich generation, because they're taking care of their children and their parents, they don't have enough to put away. And at the end of the day, this leaves more and more women who, by the way, outlives their husband if they're married, or a lot of their family members with life expectancy continuing to rise. We see them living in poverty, and over 90% of African-American retired households only survive on Social Security benefits. So these are the realities that we see. But guess what? Where there's a problem, there's a solution. And so this is why I'm so honored to have done this research and have participated in this fellowship so that we can design this ecosystem, so we can design these conversations and get it off the ground. In this digital toolkit that will be coming out later this year, we will talk about the data, talk about the policy actions. We'll also talk about financial wellness, this psychology with money, the psychology of money and how women think about it. We know from research that sometimes even when women negotiate, they still get less, even when they negotiate. And also dream work. And I put this in there intentionally because often we don't give ourselves the permission to dream. Dreaming of the perfect workplace, dreaming of the perfect retirement is also really important for women. We're just so busy to escape our life and our reality, we forget to dream. And then we'll have some resources, glossary key terms, social media toolkit, and my favorite part, the acknowledgements. So I leave you here and say that Anna's work captured the seriousness of the issues women face in her book. And she summarized it in her final chapter, Pennies and Pensions, the True Cost of Being a Woman as You Age. And I argue it is insightful of how untapped this research market really is, and how there is so much more opportunity for us to do more of that research. So it was a no-brainer after I read your book last year that you would be in conversation with us today to do the Mullin Welch lecture, because I knew that sharing the stage with you was beyond anything except for helping women really understand the true costs of the lives that they are experiencing. So I'll be around. I'm happy to connect with each and every one of you after today's conversation, answer questions, but more importantly, uplift your work so we can get some things done. Thank you, Tiffany.
What's up? Oh, yeah. There you go. Yeah, thanks, sir. Thank you, Cortney. It's my pleasure to welcome our guest speaker to the stage. Anna is a doctoral candidate at the Harvard Kennedy School studying public policy and economics. She also serves as a graduate affiliate at Harvard Kennedy School's Women in Public Policy Center and the Institute for Quantitative Studies. Anna is a doctoral fellow for several prestigious organizations, including the National Science Foundation, the Ford Foundation, Center for Black Entrepreneurship, Roosevelt Institute, Russell Sage Foundation, and Stone Program in Wealth Distribution, Inequality, and Social Policy. Between these two, I'm not sure how they're sleeping ever. Her first book, The Black Agenda, The Double Tax being her second book, Bold Solutions for a Black Agenda, Bold Solutions for a Broken System, published in 2022. It's the first trade publication to exclusively feature Black scholars and experts across economics, education, health, climate, criminal justice, and technology. Imagine that, the first book in 2022 published with exclusively Black females scholars. It's pretty amazing. She co-founded, on top of all that, she co-founded the Sadie Collective in 2018, the first nonprofit addressing the underrepresentation of Black women in economics and related fields. She's the youngest recipient of the United Nations Women's Rights Award, an honor some of you may remember Vice President Kamala Harris also received. Her writing and commentaries have appeared in Time, Bloomberg, NPR, and the New York Times. In 2023, she was selected for the inaugural Forbes 30 Under 30 Boston cohort. In 2025, Anna was selected as the Futurist of the Year for her focus on economic inequality. Her second book, The Double Tax, published in 2025, explores the costs women face, why the bill runs higher for women of color, and why closing gaps helps everyone. Please join me in welcoming Anna to the stage for a fireside chat with Cortney.
Put that up. Can you put this up?
What's going on? Y'all quiet.
All right.
Oh, my bad. I have to put this one back.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
They're a little quiet. I'm surprised.
Okay, it's gonna get active very soon.
So, you know what? Like I said, I'm really excited. But before we go into questions, I have a surprise for Anna.
Wait, before we get into your surprise, can we just give Cortney one more round of applause?
Oh,
Thank you. They're your flowers. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, I have a little story time. Y'all ready for some story time? So, I met Anna last month.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the first time. Followed her to work for decades. We kind of had the same circles, all of it, right? And Sadie Collective was hosting the conference. Shout out to Sadie Collective.
Oh yeah.
And I just said, "Excuse me, are you Anna Gifty?" And she goes, "Yes." And I said, "I'm Cortney Sanders." Then she goes, "Oh my God." And so we do the pleasantries, and then I go into the room and it's no seat available. Kind of like what it is today. It's no seats available. And I just stand in the corner.
You should have told me.
No, this is good. No, listen to the story time.
Okay.
And you go, "Sit in the reserve seat." I said, "No, I can't." And she goes, I said, "I'm not speaking." She goes, "You go, it's my seat. I'm sure. Go sit in this." And I had front row seat for the entire conference. That was sitting room only because Anna, who just met me literally 5 minutes before and was like, "Sit down, girl. Go have a seat. You can take my seat." And that literally happened. And then it gets better. So after the conference, I go and, they're like, everybody's just like talking to Anna, right? Which is what I want to do all the time. And she's intently looking at the student. And you know how you try to do like the church wave, goodbye, like, "Hey, I'm leaving, good to see you." And she's just intently focused on the student. Other people would have been like, "Oh, give me a minute, let me say bye to this person." She intently stared at that student and listened to that student talk about their college experience and economics and their math program. And I had to leave because the Uber was waiting and I didn't want it to leave me. But I remember that, and I just think it speaks to so much to your character.
Oh,
So much that how intentional you are.
Mom and Dad.
Yeah. So it is a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, Cortney.
You know what? Let's just start off with the book,
Okay.
right? So you describe yourself as a researcher in the back of the book, right? But aren't you an economist?
So, news alert. No. So first and foremost, thank you all so much for having me here. The turnout here is, I'm not gonna lie, it's blowing my mind. So I'm so grateful to hopefully meet all of you after this. I see some of y'all got the books. Shout out to some Meyerhoff scholars that I'm seeing in the crowd. These are my UMBC alum, University of Baltimore County that we went to. Yeah, I'm an economist. And this is actually something that has taken me some time to accept. I think, back in 2008, I was in 5th grade, so I know I'm dating myself. Sorry. But obviously the financial crisis took place, and I think that the word economist kind of, people would grimace a little bit like, "Oh, you an economist?" You know what I'm saying? So I think that what's been interesting to see is, being trained obviously in the classes that I'm being trained in. I'm taking labor economics and have taken behavioral science and behavioral economics, and not really thinking, "Oh, this makes me this thing that, talking heads would call themselves on the news," right? I would say that the turning point for me was probably when we've been traveling with this book. I don't know if y'all know Flat Stanley. I might be dating myself again, yeah? But like this book and me have been sort of traveling around the world, and when we were in London, people were just introducing me as an economist. And I think it was different because, you know, in the States, I think people are benchmarking on me being a student, whereas there, it's like they didn't really know me. So they were like, okay, so here's this economist. And I was like, you know, maybe I need to claim that. So I remember talking to my dad, and he was like, well, of course, you are an economist. You know, I'm Ghanaian, so you know, you're saying like that. So yeah, I think that was sort of the turning point when I was like, I think I need to own this. Not just for me, but I think that there are folks who are watching me who have similar training or who are interested in this kind of training, and they also need to be seeing themselves in these spaces as well. So yeah.
I love it. So tell me just a little bit,
Yes.
and we're gonna get in the book, I promise.
Yes. That's why I got my iPad here.
But you know, you say you're economist, and it took you some time to get to that point. It wasn't until you went across the pond.
I know, right?
Maybe not digress.
Right.
And so what do you, I mean?
Like,
but you're
what
at Harvard,
right?
So like, doesn't Harvard know about economists?
I'm screaming.
So tell us what does that mean in this context now that you have reclaimed this word and reclaimed ownership of being an economist?
Maxine Waters, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that, you know, I don't know if y'all know anything about economics or economists in general. I'm assuming that you might have some sort of understanding. You're in a policy school. Like, a lot of these types of schools are filled to the brim with economists, right? Economics is 40 Shades of Beige. Okay, I'm being real nice, right? The foundation shade is in one part of the makeup store, right? And what I will say there is that not only is it predominantly white, it's also predominantly male. And so I think that this idea of who is an economist does not look like someone like me, right? And so it's been interesting, right? You know, I always get kind of uncomfortable when I hear my bio back because I think a lot of people look at sort of the things that I've done over the last few years, and you might mistake it as, oh, you know, Anna's just trying to kind of level up. But if you really pay attention to all of the different things that kind of make up my journey, a lot of it was just to survive the space.
Wow.
Right? So the Sadie Collective, who here knows what the Sadie Collective is? Some folks?
Yeah.
Okay?
few folks.
I see some nods. Okay, love that, period, right? So the Sadie Collective is a nonprofit organization. It was co-founded by myself and my co-founder. I was a college student when I co-founded this. And this was right around the time I had just discovered economics. So I did pre-med, God help me. And then, you know, organic chemistry definitely weeded me out, all right? Not my ministry. And so, you know, later decided to pivot to math and minor in economics. And my university president at the time, this was Dr. Freeman Rabowski III, he was like, I really think you should pursue this, like pursue economics as a profession. And so what I do, I went to Google and I looked up economists. And when I tell you, I said, is anybody alive? That was the first thing, right? Respectfully. And then the second thing was, wow, all of these people went to the same 3 schools. I think at the time it was like Harvard, UChicago, and like Princeton, maybe Yale as well, was also covered in that. And I think ultimately, you know, that sort of definition of what an economist was first visually defined for me. But then it was almost like, as I was going through my journey, people tried to bring that definition up again and again. So my first encounter with this, and I talk about it in the book, and I know he hates this story, right? I won't say his name, but I had an advisor in college where I went to his office, and this was right around the time I had made the decision to pivot into this profession. And I said, look, I'm trying to get this PhD. What do I need to do? He looks at me up and down with his dusty beard, and he was like, dusty mustache, excuse me. Not saying that mustaches are bad, by the way. Mustaches are great. We love that. Yeah. His was dusty, though. And so he looks at me and he's like, the best you can do is a master's. And I said, how did you make that determination?
Well, let's just pause.
Okay, go ahead.
The best you could do is a master's as a woman of color.
Right. And by the way, a master's degree is sufficient, right? But I think it was him saying, there's no way you can do what I'm doing.
Right.
And I said, well, now I gotta do it, right? Like, out of spite. And so what did I do later? I think that like a year later, I enrolled in his class, I aced it, right? And since then, you know, UMBC's been like, oh, look at our PhD student, Anna. And I know he hate that, right? So I do think that like going through those like sort of experiences early on in the career allowed me to think about, okay, how do I create spaces where this is not somebody's norm?
Yes.
But also, if it is, we have a direct counter to it. And so the Sadie Collective has served that space. I'm also in the STEM space. Shout out to my NSBE folks who might be in the room. NSBE, okay. So NSBE's National Society of Black Engineers. I'm not an engineer, obviously, but I was in that space. I also was one of the co-founders of Black Birders Week.
Yes.
This was also direct response to
There's
sort of...
so many birders in Ann Arbor, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Is anybody here a birder?
There's a few.
Okay,
Yes.
y'all not claiming it. Exactly. I'm about to say you don't
They're
like
right there in the
cardinals, you know what I'm
audience,
saying?
yeah.
But I think ultimately that's kind of how I've thought about it. And so I think it's taken me some steps to get to defining myself as an economist. But now that I'm here, I'm owning it completely.
Right.
Yeah.
I love this. You know, so when I read your book,
Yeah.
I kind of just became an evangelist after, and I'm not even religious. I just was like, what? The double tax?
Right.
So you referred to the double tax, and I've always heard of the pink tax,
That's right.
right? And so explain a little bit more. Can you tell us what the double tax is?
Put this down.
Sure.
So let's maybe define the pink tax first for everybody just to be level set in the room. So the pink tax is defined as you have similar products that are marketed to men and women. At this time, they're not thinking about like other sort of gender expressions, but men and women. And even though they are the same product, the product that's marketed to women is also marketed up, right? It's marked up. And so if you think about this, you go to CVS, go to the razors, right? You got the pink razors, you got the blue razors. First of all, the blue razors are better. That's the T. The men razors are better. But you're paying more for your I'm Your Venus razors, okay? And they're not even that good, right? And so that's the pink tax. And I would say also that there's just extra costs that women in general just have to think about across their lifetime. Now, I want you to think about the black tax, right? This is something that a lot of black folks are familiar with, but just sort of the extra cost you have to consider now that you're a black person, right? Racism that comes into play, the bigotry that you have to consider as you are moving about the world. So the double tax is just those two things added together, right? So it's I'm incurring the pink tax while also navigating this black tax. But the thing about the black tax is anybody can actually incur that, right? Because it's really about your proximity to black folks that ends up leading to the kind of costs that you might incur. So maybe you might be somebody who is not black, but your hair texture is such that it's not closer to what would be typically a white person's hair texture. And so you're having to now do the same sort of trial and error process that most black women have to do, or most black folks have to do in general. And this is actually something that I learned when we were interviewing for the first chapter of the book, which was actually inspired by a group of black high school girls. And when I was talking to them, we then decided to talk to other groups of women. And when we were talking to Asian women, they said the same thing.
Wow.
They said, we also have to go ahead and do the trial and error because these products aren't working for our hair either. And so I think that this is really the way to think about the double tax, the compounded cost of racism and sexism and what it costs us if we don't actually account for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this because basically you're bringing to light of how like we're not a monolith, right? Like women themselves, we're not monolithic, right? Not just because who we are, that's enough, but there's layers, it's nuance.
Layers, for sure.
So you also talk about how this is not just about black women and individual harm, but that everyone is affected by the double tax.
That's right.
What does that mean exactly? Everyone? Are you sure it's everyone? Are you sure it's guys?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. It's everybody. It's this cup of water. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Right. What I'll say here is, one other way to think about the double tax, if you're familiar with the literature, is it's the quantification of misogynoir. So it's really like if you take the discrimination and prejudice that happens against black women and you extrapolate it, it could also be harm that happens to other groups of people who overlap in identities with black women, right? I like to explain the double tax as, we're all in the same economic block, all in the same neighborhood, right? So let's say you're in a cul-de-sac, right? And your house is next to somebody's house, but there's also houses that are maybe 3 or 4 houses down. If one of those houses gets on fire, what's your choices? You can either say, okay, you know what? I'm gonna catch up on this other episode of Love Island, right? I don't know if y'all watch Love Island. Traders? Question mark? Right? I'm throwing out some shows out here. I'm going to go back inside. I'm not going to really address that fire. I don't think that fire is my problem. It's on their property. And you risk potentially having that fire spread to your home.
Right.
And I would say that right now we're kind of living through that fire. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example that's been really prominent in the news. So there's a woman by the name of Governor Lisa Cook. I don't know if you guys know this name, but this woman is the first black woman to be appointed to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Right. You might be wondering, who are these people? Why should I care? They are the economists that manage the economists that manage the economy.
Yes.
Okay? That's what they do. So they're the ones setting interest rates. They're the ones who are advising on how sort of different parts of the government should be thinking about monetary policy. You do not want hacks in this position because this has global implications for loads of people, not just people here in the States, but beyond, right? So what's going on? I'm going to try to be cute about it, okay? What's going on? There's a certain man who's trying to get a certain person out of their position. This certain man is the President of the United States. He's trying to get Governor Lisa Cook out of her position. He's claiming that it's fraud. We now know that's not true. It's baseless, right? There's folks who say that she's not qualified. She actually taught at Michigan State. She was a tenured professor of macroeconomics. Before that, she has done service at 4 of the Federal Reserve banks out of the 12. So she's worked at a third of the Federal Reserve System. She got her PhD from UC Berkeley.
Wow.
She's advised presidents. She's advised foreign entities, including Russia. So I don't know why you wouldn't want somebody like that working for the U.S. government, okay? So I'm going to give you a hypothetical scenario, and we're hoping, I'm going to knock on wood here, that it doesn't happen. Let's say that Governor Lisa Cook is successfully ousted by the President of the United States. What that means now is that this independent body of economists that's supposed to advise the economy on interest rates that affect whether or not you can own a home, whether or not you can borrow for school, etc. Now, they're subject to political whims. So now he can just put people in that position that just serve his interest and his buddy's interest. Notice how I didn't mention you.
Yes.
Right? And so how is this the double tax? This is a cost that an individual black woman is facing. But if this cost goes unaddressed, what did I just say? Global
Everyone.
implications. And so that's a really good example of putting out that fire so that the rest of the neighborhood doesn't catch on fire either. Yeah.
And that goes to even someone who's, working at the grocery store and the manager doesn't know, anything except for, I don't like this person and she's a woman, so I want to oust her.
Right.
And it just kind of can go up. You don't have to be a governor of the Federal Reserve, but that's such a great example because I think it really articulates the global impact the double tax really has on our lives.
That's right.
Whether we know it or not.
That's right.
So let's get into the thick of things, right?
Yeah.
So why is it important that in the double tax,
Yeah.
you talk about how the double tax shows up in a woman's entire life? So she goes on to talk about like just from her early life to her mid-career and to how she aged. And I really want you to hone in on how we should think about the connections between all those costs and then how they compound into someone's like retirement or end of their life.
Yes. So when we were writing this book, and I say we a lot when I'm talking about writing the book, I wrote the book, but there was a huge team that made this book possible. So I'm going to say we a lot. I'm just going to give you a heads up. So when we were working on this, I kind of was writing the first chapter, obviously based off of the experiences that the high school girls were sharing. But then as I was writing, I was like, my niece might need to read this book. And so what would she need to know about the cost that she could potentially face as she is aging, right? And then I thought to myself, well, my sister's also raising kids right now for the first time. What also might she want to reflect on and think about as she is sort of navigating that stage of life? So the way that I thought about breaking out the double tax, right? I like to say it's sort of a literature review for the masses, right? We're bringing all of this evidence that we have and we're making it accessible to you because a lot of this evidence is behind paywalls, behind the ivory tower. And so I just want everyday people to be able to go into their library and check this out. The way that I thought about it was, okay, you have your first mirror dealing with beauty standards. Then you have your first career. So you're dealing with your first paycheck, your first boss, right? Promotion, even just thinking about how you encounter the workplace, first home, if you decide to get there, right? First, kid, or if you're thinking about family planning. Of course, thinking about caregiving, right? And then, of course, retirement. And what I would say is that just as we just talked about a single instance of the double tax not being addressed and having these global implications, if we think about a woman's life, if you don't address the double tax early on, it just shows up at the end of your life. So this is something that when we were talking to older women, seasoned women, okay? They were saying, and this is clock it for those who don't know. This is clock it for those, actually this, right? I'm hearing this woman, Leah, talk about, her story. This is a white woman, she's in her 70s.
Right, yes, let's talk about Leah.
She's talking about it.
Yeah.
And she's saying, I didn't get career opportunities earlier. And so now I'm having to build up on those career opportunities now, right? And I'm like, but aren't you like, she's 70. And she's like, yeah, but my career just started. Oh, wait, you're supposed to be resting technically, right?
Hey.
I think the other thing too that, I'll share maybe a personal anecdote here is what this book really allowed me to do is really empathize with the women in my life. So as I was kind of writing it out, I kind of realized, the decision my mom made in this instance is why there's less decisions in another. And I'll give you an example. So my mom revealed to me as I was writing this book that she faced discrimination when I was a kid. And so she left her job. Well, when she left her job, she forgone her, is that the right word? Forgo her pension benefits. So that meant that all the time that she was out of work, she wasn't getting any benefit, right?
Yeah.
And so by the time we get to her late 60s, she's now back in the workforce, right? But what I realized was, man, her inability to have that income, one, might have contributed us not being able to move from our affordable housing neighborhood, right? If I hadn't gotten the scholarships, it would have affected whether or not my parents would have been able to help me afford college, right? All of these different trickle-down effects, And so essentially what I'm learning is that even if you're facing the double tax in one season of life, if it goes unaddressed, it just compounds over the entire lifetime. And so you have to think about solutions right then and there because it's not like they're existing in isolation. A lot of times there's reverberations that exist throughout the rest of someone's life. Yeah.
I love this. And I love how you're talking about the decisions that you don't make obviously just gets into the decisions
that you have to make.
That's
right.
Yeah. You also talk about, and this is in the pennies and pensions section of the book, she talks about how home ownership for Black women shows up in retirement totally different.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about this a little bit more, because this was a statistic that I hadn't really considered. As a person who worked in Social Security, a person who was designing the 90th anniversary for Social Security at the agency, and I had this huge aha moment. And I bring it up because I think many of you know the blight that Detroit experienced in home ownership, right? And how there's this resurgence and there's this revitalization that's happening and this vibrancy. But I think it's untold stories like this one in the book that just brought a different type of nuance for me. So share a little bit more about that.
Yes. Let me just do a quick poll. How many people here own a home?
So about a third
Keep
of the
your
room.
hands up.
Yeah.
Just look around and see who else owns it. Do you guys see a pattern?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. How many people are renting right now? Okay. Again, look around.
Yeah.
See if you see a pattern.
And for those of you who are online, about a third of the room that own homes, majority of them were white hands.
Right.
And then when she asked... And older.
Right.
And older. And when she asked for who were renting, it were mostly all young people and mostly all women represented, but all young people, and also almost nearly everyone that were people of color in this room.
That's right. So this is actually, obviously a straw poll that we're doing, but The National Association of Realtors releases a report every single year. You might have never heard about it. I'm letting you know now that it's something that you should pay attention to. This report breaks down the demographics of who owns homes and how they're able to afford the homes that they own. Okay? So in 2024, this was a staggering stat that I saw. Okay? I said, that was uncomfortable laughter. Okay? Okay? They looked at the percentage of homeowners that were first-time homeowners for black folks and for white folks. For white folks, does anybody want to just take a wild guess what the percentage was, what share it was of homeowners that were buying homes for the first time? Y'all can just yell out a number. Damn, you got it. No, literally.
Yeah.
It was 20%, which means that 80% of white folks buying homes in 2024, second,
Wow.
third,
Wow.
fourth, right?
Yeah.
Now, if we look at black homeowners who were first-time homeowners, 49%.
Let's just sit with that statistic.
Sorry. Let's sit with that,
Wow.
for real.
Wow.
49%.
First time being
Like
home
share of black folks who are buying homes,
for the first time.
49% of them were first-time homeowners. Now we got to think about what you just said. How does this tie into retirement? Well, it turns out that the group that borrows quite a bit from the retirement savings account, 401k, are black folks. So let's do the math, okay? I gotta adjust myself a little bit.
She's an economist.
If I'm trying to buy a home and I can't really afford it because I lack generational wealth, right? And that's something that I also learned recently, right? That a lot of folks get a jump start.
Yes.
When we were talking to black women and white women, some of the stats here are the following. So for women in general, when we're buying homes, we're paying 2% more on average. And when we're selling them, we're getting 2% less.
Wow.
Okay? So let's just use that as a baseline. Now, tack on the blackness, okay? What they found was that black folks were much more likely to pull from their 401ks to afford their homes. And so if we're doing the math here, that means that if I'm trying to buy this house, I don't got the generational wealth, I'm pulling from my retirement account to pay for the house, right? By the time I need to retire, do I have any money to retire with?
Right.
And this is actually the dilemma. I like to say that the United States, and I would also throw the UK in, that's a stray, right? Is allergic to black homeownership, right? For some reason, it's like we're gonna make this really, really, really hard for you to get. And what's unfortunate is that black folks who do own homes, if you think about the black wealth portfolio, the majority of it is home equity.
Right.
Which means that you are now at the what? Mercy of the home, of the housing market. So what happened in 2009 and 2008?
What's happening now?
What's happening now, right? So if you lose your home, you lose your what? Wealth, right? And so I think that, thinking about this, I tell a very personal story at the beginning of this chapter. This is one of my favorite chapters in the book. And I talk about how when I was growing up, around the time of the financial crisis, I told you I was in 5th grade, but I remember it, okay? My parents were traveling to model homes a lot. So every weekend we would go to a model home. I'm from Columbia, Maryland. If you know anything about Columbia, it's a planned city, right? So they had a mix of affordable housing and like very wealthy housing, folks who are wealthy living there as well. But my parents wanted to upgrade. And they saw an opportunity, okay? It crashed, maybe we can sneak in here and try to own a home. Every time we would go to one of these model homes, it was like a reminder of the American dream, right? But then we would have to leave. And I think that actually is a really good representation of what a lot of people deal with. That for a lot of folks, the American dream is something you can maybe touch for a couple seconds.
Wow.
And then you got to go back to the reality of your life. And I think for my generation, Some of us are like, I mean, what is the American dream at this point, right? You know, the American dream is me paying rent, okay, on time. Shout out to my landlord, right? Okay, not shout out to my landlord, actually. But that being said, I think that that's kind of, you know, retirement's not even something that we're thinking about.
Right.
But it is something that now it's almost become even more restrictive to save up. And if we think about all the other layers of this, like if you're not in the right career where maybe pensions aren't even available to you. So a lot of black women that I spoke to at the end of life were saying, yeah, like I don't even have a pension. Social Security is bankrolling my life, right? And I like to tell people, please, if your politician says, I don't want to collect any more income for Social Security, fire them immediately, okay? Because it is keeping the majority of women above the age of 65 alive. Right? And if we're thinking about the fact that women tend to outlive men, we're talking about matriarchs, we're talking about caregivers, right? We haven't even talked about caregiving. But if you rob that group of individuals of any sort of basic sustenance, the whole thing comes crumbling down.
That's right.
Right.
And I agree. Fire them, not because I'm biased, which I am, but also, you know, 11,000 people turn 65 every day globally. 11,000 people. And so not only do we need Social Security, it is what we need right now. Full stop. So I love that you said that. And by the way, young people, don't worry. So Congress shall act, and I hope that they will. But I have to say this because we have to shift the narrative. How many of you young people say, or you've heard young people say, Social Security won't be around by the time I retire? Every hand just came raised in the room. The fact is, if Congress does not act, instead of getting the full dollar, you'll get 80 cents of the dollar. But if we privatize Social Security, you get 0 of the dollar.
Yep.
Okay? So I think I'd rather 80 cents than no cents.
That's right.
Okay, that's like my little nephew's math. You know, like give me a quarter, you know, instead of nothing at all.
But also just to connect this to your work, right?
Yes.
I don't think people understand ageism is a thing in the workforce.
That's right.
You know, like you might be like, oh, I might be able to like get a job.
Let's talk about this.
Like it's harder, and it's especially harder if you're a woman, right? And that's because, you know, our society's like has beef with women's wrinkles. It's like crazy beef, right?
How much do we spend on beauty alone a year?
A lot. I think I don't know off the top of my head right now, but I think over a lifetime, it's at least 200 grand, at least. But of course, we're not thinking about tariffs, right? We're not thinking about the changing beauty trends and what becomes popular and how sort of demand and limited supply impacts the prices of things. All of that comes into play. Right? And so I do think that, like, when I say fire them, I was being kind of like mean, but I'm being very serious. Like, I think that, like, it's whether or not you survive your later years or not.
Right.
Or whether or not the people around you survive, right? I think that it matters.
You were talking about something that's really important, though, and we're getting close to the end, but I want to kind of pull this point out before we close, because you talk a lot about occupational segregation. Her research, her PhD research is on occupational segregation. And I want you to kind of just explain to everyone in the most basic terms how our wrinkles, ageism, sexism, all impacts our retirement. And you talk about this and you calculate this. So in the book, she has what's called the final bill. And she lays out literally the cost and disaggregates the data. How does that occupational segregation, these labor market barriers, this anti-wrinkle situation really this exiting the labor market to caregive affects us when we age? So
let's just take a hypothetical woman, okay? We can use me.
Okay.
As an example. I'm 29, so I'm gonna enter the labor force. But I'm a black woman, so that means that I'm gonna probably deal with hiring discrimination, right? So that means I'm gonna probably have to put out more resumes to just get one call back, right? This is not debatable. There is oodles of evidence that supports this, okay?
Especially if you put your whole name.
Especially if I put my whole name.
Right.
Right? And God forbid I'm called Lakeisha, then suddenly I don't get any callbacks, right? And so then, okay, I get a job, but the job is likely gonna pay me less, right? They think that inherently I'm less productive than a white man. And so they're gonna factor that into my starting pay. Also, I'm a woman, so maybe I might have kids. Another doc, right, in my starting pay. Now my starting pay, I'm already starting lower than, Chet. I'm gonna call him Chet for now, right?
Sorry, Chet.
Sorry, Chet. And so, okay, I'm making less than Chet, but maybe I can work my way up. But wait a minute, they don't think I can lead. So now the climb to the top, I have to climb a ladder that has further rungs, and those rungs are probably broken. It's gonna cost me something to climb that ladder. Okay, let's say I climb the ladder, okay, but still, I wanna buy a home. But my family doesn't have generational wealth, and they might have not also purchased a home themselves, right? This is actually my reality. So my parents have never owned a home in the States. Okay, so that means that I'm probably gonna have to pull from the 401k account that I have in my company has done a matching program. I'll try to pull from that. Okay, I pull from that, able to afford the home, but maintain the home. Maybe I want to start a family. Okay, well, childcare costs an arm and a leg and a tooth in this country, right? Second mortgage. So, okay, I'm gonna have to think about that second mortgage on top of my first mortgage. Got it. Now my parents are getting older, and caregiving is also not cheap. So now I have to consider all those costs that come with taking care of my parents. I want to make sure that they are living a full life till their end of life. Okay, at some point, I'm now going to be older, and now I have to retire. Well, if Social Security is here, I might get some income from the government, which, excellent. But I just depleted my 401k account to afford my housing costs and maybe other costs that came down the line. Black don't crack, but I'm getting older, right? And so, they know that I'm getting older. And so me not being youthful and not being able to satisfy the beauty standard as easily is also not gonna dock me in the workplace. And because I don't have a whole lot of, a well of wealth to pull from to kind of sustain me through the end of my life, I'm probably gonna have to work past retirement age. Right? Not to mention that, let's say I want to pursue a career where, it's gonna cost me quite a bit to get my college degree, maybe my graduate degree. I'm now gonna have to take out loans to pay for that degree. Now that loans is coming back at the end of my life, and those loan interest payments don't go nowhere.
No.
Y'all know, right? Okay? And so all of those costs that I just mentioned are at the end of my life.
Yeah.
And so the question is, do we want to burden people with all those costs as they're getting ready to transition out of their life, as they're getting ready to take care of their loved ones? Especially if you think about the fact that quite a few women above the age of 65 are the ones sustaining their family trees.
That's right.
And so think about it. If all of the matriarchs are being burdened with these costs, they have to take care of everybody else. At some point, something has to break.
Yes.
And it's gonna be our system. I like to tell people that caregiving is an economic crisis or an economic opportunity in waiting. And we have to make, there's no none of the above.
Right.
You gotta pick one, right? And this is a global situation that's happening. So you take the costs that we talked about today and just adjust them for the various countries that might be affected here. And it's happening globally. And so that's why in the double tax, I know we've talked a lot about the problems today, but the solutions are actually imperative.
Yes, so let's talk about the solution. So,
Sure.
And we're going to open it up for questions in
Got
a
me
few
preaching.
minutes. So get ready for your questions, and I know that you have some.
Yes.
So let's talk about the solutions, including what employers need to be doing in all of this, right? So I think we can put a face to some of this as well,
Yeah.
right? We're talking about, it's just the labor market. well, who hires people?
Right.
Who discriminates against those people in the hiring practice? Right. How do we hold them accountable? And then more importantly, how do we think about those solutions? And what is it that we need to do? What are your top 3? And how do we hold, these employers or these people who are creating these barriers account?
So I think that there's like 3 levels to the solution. So there's like your individual level, what you can do. There's what you can do with your community. And then there's what you can hold people in power accountable to. So as an individual, one thing I'll tell, especially young folks, please talk to your friends about how much you make.
Yes.
When I tell you companies are profit maximizing entities, what does that mean? It means they want to be rich, okay? They want to keep as much money in the pocket as possible.
Yeah.
And they can't afford to pay you what you ask. I'll tell a quick story. I know I'm running out of time. I was working for an organization, a bank, and I was getting ready to negotiate how much I wanted. This bank told me they couldn't give me more money. Listen to my sentence. This bank, hello, you got money in the vault, right? So when I tell
They're
you like
literally printing it.
Literally printing, yeah, right? So I think individual level in the workplace, be transparent about your workplace experiences. It's really imperative to make sure that, you're able to advocate for yourself, but also like link together with other folks to advocate for better conditions, which takes me to the community. I think for the community, I'm going to be honest, them unions be unioning. Yeah?
Yes.
We love a union in this household, okay? Especially in a place like this where I think unions have played such a big role in the fabric of the city and the fabric of the surrounding space. Unions really are associated with higher wages, better conditions. If you're a grad student, I hope there's a union here.
There is a union here.
You should be part of it, okay?
Yes.
Because, I love my grad union. Shout out to my grad union, right? Because I think that folks really don't understand the power of collective bargaining.
Right.
It is really one of the main tools in our toolkit as community members to really get what we deserve. Because a lot of these corporations are able to sort of monopolize certain aspects of our society, really the one way you can fight back is to fight back with as many people as possible, and you outnumber them, right? And so a lot of times people say some of the folks in power are paying you to just like be satisfied with your conditions.
Right.
And so when you decide, I'm not satisfied anymore, guess what? You can collectively bargain with other folks and improve those said conditions. Right. And again, I like to say unionize your life. So this doesn't have to only apply to the workplace, but it can apply to all other areas of your life, right? You can band with other folks in your community and say, hey, there's only like 10 shades of makeup here, and I'm having to travel 45 minutes to get my shade. Or, thinking about ways to bring more folks into certain professions so you decrease the barriers. And that's what we saw with Black Birders Week, Sadie Collective, that sort of thing. And then I would say at the federal level, and maybe just the level of power that folks who are in charge are kind of enacting different types of rules and regulations, laws and bills. I think we got to get a little bit more strict. Our program needs to get stricter. I think we are entitled to leaders that care about us. That's not a radical thing to say, but somebody on Twitter will say that's radical, right? But it's not radical to say I want my leader that I elected to care about my lived conditions.
Yes.
And so when I say we need to get more strict, I do literally mean you should be interrogating the people who are claiming to represent you. Do you actually care about me? If you do, how is that showing up in the way that you show up for me? Especially in rooms that I can't be in.
Regardless of ideology.
Regardless of ideology, right? And so I think that looks like holding folks' feet to the fire, When it comes to Congress, the moment you say, hey, I'm about to elect somebody else, oh, hold on now, right? I think even when it comes to sort of your everyday bosses, this is where that community level support can really be useful in saying, yeah, we're not cool with this. And we will report. The EEOC is still alive and kicking. It's saying some crazy things right now, but it's still alive and kicking. And so I think that when it comes to powerful figures, it's really about accountability mechanisms. And that's kind of what my dissertation research, which is not this, right? Dissertation research really gets at. I don't really trust that organizations are going to do the right thing. They don't really have an incentive to, not the for-profit ones at least. And so if you guys are going to produce decades of research that says you just won't hire people because they're Black, guess what I'm going to do? make it hard for you to really to pull that off. And so I'm gonna go ahead and design accountability mechanisms to make sure that even if you decide to do that, the collective will punish you for doing that. Yeah.
I love that. And so this is the final question. So if you have a question, please, what are we doing? Are we raising hands? All right,
Okay.
great. So I want to end with, for the women who are feeling the double tax every day, right? For all of us who are feeling it every day, what do we say to them and what hope do we give them in this moment?
Maybe I could share what gives me hope. And hopefully that also gives you hope, because it doesn't change throughout the seasons. So I told you at the very beginning, I wrote this book for my nieces. Actually, if you look at the very beginning of the book, I dedicated it to my 3 nieces. And I do this for them. I like to say that, like, if I can reduce the bigotry they face by even 1%, it was worth it. It was worth it. Because bigotry sucks. Racism sucks. These sort of like systems of oppression are very unnecessary, right? I believe that people should just be able to thrive as they are. And again, that might be a radical position, but I think that that's really kind of peak humanity. I mean, I think we're all watching the astronauts right now in space. I love them. Oh my gosh, I love them so much. But I think that that's a really great example. Diversity, teamwork, unencumbered imagination, hope, awe. These things are just part of the fabric of our communities, part of the fabric of our society, and we should be uplifting those things. And so for me, if part of uplifting those things means addressing the things that are weighing that down, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna name it, I'm gonna try my best to eliminate it, and then I'm gonna empower the next generation to do the same so everybody else afterwards is better off. So that's what gives me hope, knowing that that work is reaching people like y'all.
Yeah, I love that. Let's give Anna a round of applause.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna take a few questions. And then we are going to end. And so there's a question way in the back here. We have a mic coming for our online guests. So yes, we do. We need it for the online folks. I know you don't. I know you don't. We can hear you great, but we want to make sure the folks online get to hear you as well.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, hi.
Hi. Thank you for coming. This is truly an honor. Could you?
Your bling is really blinging, by the way. Yes.
Could you project or imagine what the future of currency is? Because you're laughing at the kind of appalling nature of banks printing money, then expecting us to, work for it. Work is good, but at a certain point, you got to ask, when do caregivers actually receive the care they need to survive? That's my question.
Yeah. So I'll be honest with you. I'm not a macroeconomist, so I'm not going to speak on what I don't know. But what I'll say is, maybe to take part of your question and the last part of your question, I do think that an economy that doesn't leave anybody behind is really possible. I do think that. And I do think that we actually have quite a few examples of what it means to center community well-being actually across the world. I don't think the US leads in that as an example. I think if you go to, like, I'm from Ghana originally. If you go to parts of Ghana, if you go down south to Latin America, right? Even if you are looking across Native communities across the country, there's like a very clear, almost like innate, like, I'm gonna take care of you type thing that I think is possible. In terms of the future of currency, I can't speak to that. Like I said, I'm not a macroeconomist, but from the folks that I know, I don't think crypto is all it's cracked up to be. But I would talk to folks who are much more knowledgeable about that question, just because, again, that's just like not my field of expertise. But yeah.
And I'll just add to say, one of the currencies, you were kind of hinting at it with the care economy, but it is a $600 billion investment if we pay people just minimum wage of the federal government's minimum wage, paying them for their labor in the care.
And let me maybe give context to that, because I just realized that was what you were saying, so my apologies. A lot of folks are leaving their jobs to take care of their loved ones. So not addressing, when I say it's an economic crisis and an economic opportunity in waiting, what I mean by that is people, like our economy is shrinking because we're not taking care of the people who care for people.
That's right.
Right? And it just doesn't, it's not logical. So that's kind of, it's possible. Folks are stingy.
Yeah.
So that's why we got to fire some folks. Yeah.
Yes, right. So that people can work to thrive,
right.
to your point.
Literally.
I thought we saw 2 more questions. Questions over here? Right here. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm nearsighted too. And please don't be shy. This is a safe
Please
space.
don't.
Brave space.
Brave space.
Yes.
All right. Hi, ladies, and thank you so much for coming. Anna, I haven't read your book yet.
That's fine.
Yet.
The audiobook is fun.
Oh, okay. So if it's your voice, I think it's going to be very fun.
It is my voice.
Okay, all right.
Lots of joking.
Yes.
But I'm very curious. Did you choose to quantify what the double tax is in the book? And I'm curious what that number is. And if you didn't, I'm curious why you chose not to include what that number is in the book.
So I definitely quantified it in the book. Yes, I just don't know those numbers off the top of my head. At the very end of the book, what I do is I document what Cortney was talking about, which is sort of the final bill. And it's quite literally, let me see if I can show you.
I think I might.
You might not be able to see it,
Yeah.
but it's quite literally a receipt.
Yes. She
Right?
has
So I break it out by the gender gap, which is usually where the conversation stops, right? And then I say, okay, we have an understanding of what this is. And by the way, white women still too have a ways to go to get equality and equity and that sort of thing. But then if you start to then compare black women to white women, you realize that black women are worse off on pretty much every outcome, right? And women of color more broadly. And so, yeah, I think for me as an economist, right, it was important for the numbers to be central to the argument. Otherwise, you're going to dismiss this. And unfortunately, like, that's just kind of been our reality. There's a lot of stories that are reported in the news, in op-eds, that I think are really compelling, but a lot of folks in power don't really pay attention to the stories. And I like to say that economics is often the language of power. And so if you really want powerful people to pay attention to what you're saying, you're gonna have to add some economics to it. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. I thought I saw another question over here as well.
Oh, sorry. Dean.
The dean herself. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. So in the U.S., is there a regional component to the double tax? So if you were to look north, south, east, west, my suspicion is that the double tax is intensified in the South.
100%.
But I wonder if you can talk about the kind of geographic aspect of the double tax and what fuels it, you think?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do a regional analysis on the numbers. And part of that is because the research itself, at least quantitatively, doesn't do a regional analysis, and that's essentially what I'm reflecting. But I'd say that your hypothesis is correct, right? So a lot of the barriers for black women and women of color, and then by extension, all women, really do intensify in places where women have less agency, right? And so it might not only be the South, but it might be other parts of the country and beyond where women just don't have access to health services, right? Which makes it harder for you to, mother, the way that you want to mother, or even just having access to sort of, workforce development programs, which also might add to sort of the barriers that you're going to have to overcome in the workplace, or sort of codifying just, or I would say normalizing some of the biases that we're seeing, and people even feeling disincentivized to even feel empowered to fight back against some of those things. And so I'd say that for sure, maybe anecdotally, regionally, there's probably differences, but that's definitely maybe, I don't know about the next book, because I gotta finish this dissertation, y'all. But definitely someone should extend that work for sure.
Yeah, I love
thank
it.
you.
I think it's just, thank you for the question, Dean, because I think it's a great way to end in that we have so much more to learn from this double tax, right? So Today, I offered how there's a missing ecosystem of economists talking to people in the retirement finance sector, talking to people and women gender issues, and they're not consistently talking to each other. They might dabble in each other's work, but they're actually not just collectively speaking with each other on a regular. And then you just brought up how there's even more research to be done with the double tax, from regional to thinking about how we can compound it with other things, lasering in on care work policy, more and more and more, and even global, right? This was mostly domestic with a sprinkle of European nations for examples, but we hadn't even touched the global south.
That's right.
So I love that you brought this up, and I am so honored that you all are here. I'm gonna leave you on a note, and I hope it doesn't make the vibe goes down, but my mother passed away 10 years ago in my first year of grad school in 2016. And I know she would be so proud of this moment.
Oh, Cortney.
She died before her retirement age at the age of 57. And she was a beacon of light, a social worker. She was the PTA mom, everything and above. We had people at her service who were like trying to speak because they wanted to talk about how much this stranger meant so much to them in their life. And so I'm incredibly thankful to CEW staff, to the Ford School, to you, Anna, because it will be the women. It will be the women to save, to take care of, and be there for us. And I am so incredibly honored to share this space with you all this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank y'all so much. Appreciate it.
So as a surprise, I am bringing up a renowned artist, Sam Scipio, who did visual note-taking for us and captured today's conversation. So Sam is actually going to upload it to, yes. Joe, Sarah, Tech.
Okay, I think I actually know how to do it. Yeah, it should work when you plug it in. Okay, so I was drawing during this talk. I'm going to add a little bit more color later, but there's just some illustrations that kind of show
it went
the
off.
concepts we.
Sometimes you have to tap the.
This was such a rich Oh my God.
Oh, here, I'll tap it for you again.
Such a rich conversation. I think something that really struck me was the notion that if the later we fix this, the later we address these issues, the more they show up and in bigger ways later in our lives. So just thinking about the journey that we all go on and kind of ways we can look at the women around us to mitigate harm that's done to them. So yeah, I'm really happy that I was able to draw this. I think we're gonna send this to everyone after.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm gonna add a little bit more color, a little bit more detail. This was an awesome conversation, so thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. This is so good.
You did so great.
All right.
Okay.
Hey, thank you all so much for coming. My name is Sarah Prince. I'm the Community Partnerships Program Manager. Oh. I'm the Community Partnerships Program Manager at CEW, and it has been my great pleasure to lead the planning of this program, which would not have happened without the vision and partnership of Cortney Sanders, as well as the generosity of donors like the Mullin Welch family. Special thanks to Anna Gifty for traveling to Ann Arbor from Boston to be with us today, and to Sam Scipio for traveling from Detroit. Thank you to Celeste for welcoming us, and to Daniel Rivkin and Cindy Harris, and everyone at the Ford School for all your help in making this event happen. Thanks also to Carl Cole from Michigan Media for all his help and all the people at Michigan Media. Nate Dorman from ITS, Sabrina Crosby for captioning, my friend Lisa Thompson for taking photographs, and to all the staff at CEW, plus all of whom are supportive and wonderful colleagues. Thank you. Please join us in the Great Hall for a reception.